Hello, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukie Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukieoregon.gov. You can locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is located. If you haven't reviewed the agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. I believe there's copies of the agenda over on the table, as well as comment cards for any members of the community attending tonight. Our first order of business is our native lands acknowledgement. The city of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homelands of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and our gratitude to the indigenous people of this land.
Excuse me, we can't hear you very well. Just wondering if
We'll try that, see if that, did that improve things? Okay, I'd also maybe invite you to slide on up to the front row in case that's any better, but they're also playing with the microphone levels, but thank you. I think I'd like to start off by welcoming our newest member to the Planning Commission. I'm really excited to have Ernestina, who goes by Tina, here joining us tonight. Tina came highly recommended both from Mayor Beatty as well as the city manager, and I think many others. And Tina, maybe I'd give you a quick moment to introduce yourself to the members that are here tonight on the Planning Commission.
Hi, thank you for welcoming.
Hold on a second. Audio
can you hear me?
For you is not working now.
Is it working?
Oh, there we go. That's great.
Okay, good. Hi, thank you for the welcome, and I'm excited. I live here in Milwaukie. I've been participating in different committees through the 8 years I've been living here, so I'm excited to now be formally more part of another commission now, no committee. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Tina has a background in professional training in architecture, historic preservation, has served on Design Landmarks Commission in the city of Portland, and been very involved in a number of Milwaukie planning processes and committees. So again, excited to welcome someone to the commission with kind of the expertise and skill sets that you have. And I think I speak on behalf of all of us, so I look forward to getting to know you more.
Thank you.
We don't have any minutes this evening, so we can move on to informational items. Are there any informational items from staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there is an announcement regarding an upcoming event for the Transportation System Plan. And Assistant Planner Ryan Dyer is going to let us know about that.
Hey. Yes, I just wanted to let everybody know here in the room and also at home that we do have an event scheduled for next Thursday, March 21st. It'll be held in this room from 6 to 7:30 p.m. We're going to be talking about the TSP, our Transportation System Plan update generally, and then there's going to be we're referring to it as a seated workshop where we're going to discuss in small groups the goals and policies for the Transportation System Plan. So if you want to come just for that, that's fine. The sort of time before that and the short time after that is going to be to discuss just the project more generally. You can kind of float around the room, and there will be light refreshments, and there will also be childcare.
Great.
So yeah, invite your friends and your family and come out next Thursday.
Ryan, if I may, some members of the audience might be asking themselves, what the heck is a transportation system plan, and why should I take an hour and a half out of my life to show up and hear more about it? How would you answer that question?
That would be a fair question. And I would say to them that the transportation system plan is the city's long-range planning document for all modes of transportation in the city. So that's vehicles, that's pedestrians walking around, it's bikes, it's transit. We look at all different types of transportation. And then we plan out for the next 20 years, starting sort of at the high level, looking at the goals and policies, which we'll be discussing on Thursday. But at the very end of the project, we sort of use those goals and policies to identify projects for improvements. And those projects are what eventually end up in the capital improvement plan for the city. So it's how your streets and your sidewalks get improved in the city.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Any other informational items? No? Great. So we'll move on to audience participation. But this is important to note that this is an opportunity to comment on items not on tonight's agenda. So if you're here to comment on neighborhood hubs or the climate-friendly equitable communities, save that comment for those kind of orders of business. So if any members of the audience wish to comment on an item not on tonight's Planning Commission agenda, if you're participating virtually, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, or if you're dialing in, you can hit *9. If you're in the room, you could also take one of your yellow comment cards and pass it over to Adam or Vera to comment on items not on the agenda. I would say as long as it's not related to an item on the agenda, we're happy to give you a few moments and hear what your question might be. You're the only one, but that means you're a trendsetter. So press the button to unmute yourself. And if you could just introduce yourself with your name and city of residence, we don't need your address.
Bernie Stout, Milwaukie, Oregon. I just have a question on the Monroe Street Greenway. It started 10 years ago. It seems to me they're getting close to starting to finalize it. But for 10 years, it's been called a concept plan. So when do they drop the concept and call it a plan? It seems like a simple, I just don't understand why it's still called a concept plan.
Sure, thanks, Bernie.
Can somebody answer that?
Yeah, thanks, that's a great question. I guess I would look to staff to feel if you are prepared enough to answer that question. Based on what I know as a community member, Monroe Street Greenway is moving into implementation. I believe construction might start on some segments of the Greenway as soon as this summer. So I think the terminology of concept is probably maybe a little bit of a misnomer, because there is a real plan with real drawings. I was here, there was a community workshop, was it 2 weeks ago or so, where they were talking, and there was drawings out on the table, and consultants and engineers were talking about various elements of it. So I
was there.
Oh, great, yeah.
It's just that it seems like it's still kind of flowing.
Yeah.
I live on Ada Lane.
Okay.
So I'm going to be.
Sure.
And there's a choice between Garrett and Ada Lane. And I'm thinking 10 years later, they're still going, oh. And then I was looking online, and there's ADA program going past Hector Campbell School and around to Adam and 47th and back to Washington and then up to Garrett. Well, my vote's for Garrett, but how do we maneuver the process?
Sure. Yeah, I don't have a good answer on that, so I will look to staff in terms of some of the things that this gentleman has raised.
Yep. Great questions. I am not the design engineer on the project, so I'm mostly going off what we have posted on the engineering department's webpage for the project. Brandon Boutros is the city engineer assigned to the project. So the updates that I'm seeing here is that Consor has been contracted to design the greenway from 37th to Linwood. And so they are out, they have sent their surveyors out to assess current conditions, because that's what they'll be using as their baseline for the plan.
They use drones too.
Correct. They, actually, it says to wave to them, so I don't know if you did. And then on
Yeah, I
the,
was out in my yard.
perfect, great. And then on the 14th, they had the multi-project open house, which it sounds like you attended.
29th, yeah.
Or sorry, on the 29th. So what their latest update is from the 7th of March, so that was just a few days ago. So what they've collected great feedback, and they're going to do their best to incorporate what they can. So at this point, I think their Consor is out doing their existing conditions surveying to be able to prepare the base plans. They heard all the feedback from the open house, and now they're going to start incorporating those within the design plans. As far as what the next steps are, Brandon Boutros would be the answer to
Okay,
that. So as
okay.
far as kind of when we shift from concept to actually design plans, and typically they're in percentages, right?
Yep.
30%, 60, whatever. Brandon Boutros in
Is
our
the
engineering
contact?
department, he'll
Okay.
be the person to be able to answer those
Yeah, I just
questions for
emailed
you.
him today.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. And as community members ourselves, I'd say, you know, if you and your neighbors have preferences over should it be on our street or the other street, those are great conversations to have with Brandon and the engineering staff. Any Zoom hands raised or star nines? Perfect. Well, at this point, we'll move on to convene as the Community Involvement Advisory Committee. And so I would like to ask staff to provide any updates, or do any CIC members have any items they wish to report on?
No updates from staff.
Not an update, but a request. If we could, at some point, have an update to the Planning Commission, one on their role as on the CIAC, and then, and I know we're going through a lot of code updates, and but also as a part of that update or learning session for the Planning Commission is maybe just a status of where we are on comprehensive plan, other community involvement activities, and again, just kind of an overall update. I've been here for about a year, and I don't know if I was fully briefed even on what CIAC was really meant to be and our role on that. So I think it's a good time to get an update.
Great. I'll share that with Laura tomorrow, and we can certainly plan that for a future agenda item.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, Commissioner Carpenter. We are, the city of Milwaukee, and I think every jurisdiction in the state of Oregon are legally required to have a community involvement advisory committee, and Milwaukee City Council asked us to serve in that function. And I do think it's been a little unclear. And so maybe returning to a conversation on that, as well as hearing a broader update, could be helpful. Tina, Commissioner Funmo, is it Mayor?
Buen Mayor.
Fuen Mayor, okay. And Commissioner Edge, anything from either of you? Oh, no? Great, thank you. Well, let's move
I
on.
had just
Oh,
one
please.
quick comment, and it's
Yeah.
the screen says March 11, and today is March 12, just to make sure that when the recording is there, that we have that wrong. So.
Noted, thank you. Well, let's move on tonight to our first hearing item. This agenda item is a Type 5 application for code amendments to adopt revisions to multiple sections of the zoning code in order to implement the Neighborhoods Hub initiative that came out of the 2020 comprehensive plan and predated work even before that. The Type 5 application for code amendments is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is for the Commission's consideration of application number ZA-2024-001. If you're here to testify, please remember to confine your remarks to the application and the relevant criteria, and please try and avoid repetition and information that might not be as relevant. Myself as the chair might mute you if online disruptions were to occur, or intervene in the room if necessary. Ultimately, the Planning Commission will make a recommendation to Milwaukee City Council regarding whether or not the proposal conforms with all the city's applicable criteria. I'd like to ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance section or sections where the criteria can be found.
Milwaukee Municipal Code Section 19.902, amendments to maps and ordinances, and Milwaukee Municipal Code Section 19.1008, Type 5 review.
Great. Thank you very much. Does any member of the commission wish to abstain from this hearing?
No.
Hearing none. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an actual or a potential conflict of interest?
No.
No.
Great. Hearing none. Let's proceed to the staff report.
Thank you, everyone. I am Adam Hiru, Associate Planner here at the City of Milwaukee, presenting about neighborhood hubs with Vera Colias, Senior Planner. So neighborhood hubs are gathering places where residents have easy access to goods and services close to their home, and they're places where neighbors can create meaningful relationships with one another. You all have probably heard that many times in this process, so a lot of this is going to be a repeat of other conversations we've probably had, but the Hubs project has its roots in the 2017 Milwaukee Community Vision and Action Plan, which engaged well over 1,000 residents in conversations about a vision for the city's future, and a lot of folks really wanted that access to those goods and services close to their home, similar to the concept of a 20-minute neighborhood. In 2018 and 2019, the city did a lot of community engagement, went out to the NDAs multiple times, did big community events and tabled at those, did a survey and found a lot of support for some concepts for some hubs locations. And in 2020, a lot of that work was enshrined in the city's comprehensive plan, and we have been kind of implementing that plan with this phase of the project. So we had a couple goals in what we're calling Hubs Phase 2. One was to refine those locations and kind of prioritize them, and also identify different types of hubs and kind of condense those down because we had about 8 types in our original work on this. Also to explore potential economic development programs that will work for the scale and the intensity of these hubs in our residential neighborhoods, as well as kind of make changes to the development code that would facilitate the growth of hubs. So one of the sections of the comprehensive plan, so we're going to kind of go through a couple of these things because this is really the guiding document for us in planning. Implement Section 8 of the Urban Design and Land Use section. So that's provide opportunities for the development of neighborhood commercial services and the provision of amenities and gathering places for residents in that area. Encouraging the development of multi-season outdoor seating areas. We've seen some of that downtown and pedestrian plazas. Provide a process for a startup and also for temporary uses that want to exist in other places. You'll see some code about that in a little bit. And then development should contribute to the pedestrian environment is another principle there. During our outreach in Phase 2, we talked to a lot of people, but we really focused our outreach on the folks who can kind of have the biggest impact on whether hubs are going to become a reality. So that was property owners, business owners, community organizations who serve the community or have space and can kind of jumpstart activities. So through Engage Milwaukee, we did about We had about 22 survey responses, did a big mailing out to all of the businesses and organizations within a quarter mile of the hubs, the 13 identified hubs from our previous work. We got a ton of engagement on that website. We had 22 different folks kind of sign up to maybe be interviewed by us, went out, talked to people, usually in their space, and discussed kind of how is the zoning currently a barrier? How can we maybe change it? What kind of interest do you have in the various hub activities that the community wants to see? We went out to all the NDAs, let them know what the situation was, the outreach that we were doing and how they could participate. And ahead of the workshops, we had well over 100 folks who had kind of contributed their engagement to the project. And then we did 6 different workshops that engaged about 123 folks in the neighborhood hubs or at neighborhood association or district association meetings. A good chunk of those were in person, about 74, the rest were online. And we had about 83% of folks answering about these code changes. That we had a lot of very specific code changes that we got opinions on, but across them, there was very little opposition to the changes and a lot of widespread support. We also published articles that got mailed out to every Milwaukie address, I think 5 different times over the course of our engagement last year. So we've really been trying to keep people in the loop. So I mentioned some of this already, but there was broad support for a lot of the ideas that the city's considering. We had a lot of feedback about allowing uses that aren't currently allowed, either in a temporary way or a more permanent way, increasing some development flexibility around things like design standards and materials that certain parts of your facade have to be made up of, the types of activities we'll allow as temporary uses, things like that. We also heard from a lot of folks, especially businesses, but also community organizations, that grant and loan support will be useful for a lot of various purposes in supporting the Hubs project. A citywide small business alliance came up as a really interesting collaboration point, maybe between the city and some of the small businesses in Milwaukie. And it seems like, this is outside of our code changes scope, but it seems like there's momentum around that idea. We also heard a lot about some areas of the city, especially the Welling, where there's not a lot of these neighborhood hubs in commercial areas now. How do we support hubs emerging or small pop-up spaces coming out of the areas like that where there's not the historical zoning to support a commercial space now? We did reconsider and expand and or kind of reduce our focus down to fewer hubs in thinking about those hub boundaries. And we have been working with the transportation system plan process to ensure that the hubs are being taken into account when we think about how we're connecting people. We're thinking about how they're accessing those hubs as well. And I mentioned before, there's a lot of interest in site improvements kind of across the board at many of these different hubs. So I'm going to try to move a little faster through these. So we evaluated and prioritized the list of hubs, all based on this feedback from the workshops in particular and from the surveys. If there was not interest in the property owners at a particular hub, that might have been an influence in us kind of maybe deprioritizing it somewhat. So in places where there was interest, we spent more time on the boundaries and more time on thinking about the zoning as well. And I'll just kind of move through that. So we used a lot of criteria. We tried to look at everything from every possible angle, did a ton of ground truthing, visiting all the hubs, collecting data on the sidewalks and the streets and the density of commercial spaces, cataloging all the buildings, things like that. And we had lists of kind of placemaking and community building criteria, because that's really what's at the center of what makes a hub. So these are some of the things. I'm not going to list every single one off, but you can see them up there, and we can kind of discuss them too as we go. So these are the hubs. This map may be somewhat difficult to see, and in the past we've kind of gone one by one here. So I'm going to try to quickly summarize sort of which hubs are being impacted by code, which hubs are priority hubs and which hubs are sort of held off to the side as a maybe future hub. So Island Station, we're calling it the Trolley Trail Hub. We have some code changes proposed for, which Vera will talk through, and it is considered a priority hub. It's the only hub in Island Station, and we want to have a hub in every neighborhood that we're kind of focusing on. Looking at Milwaukie Floral there, I see we've got some folks in the audience from Milwaukie Floral, a really, valued community center along Lake Road where a lot of activities happening, right? There's some zoning challenges there, so we've got some proposals for rezoning there, and we also have listed it as a priority. Kind of moving down to the school district office. I'm still on Lake Road on the bottom of this map. That school district office is not a great opportunity site. Maybe could do some pop-up events, but the school's not thinking about selling it or developing it. They're using it as an office. And they did some development on the southern side of that street on one of the properties that was a little more vacant, now has some big storage sheds and things on it, so it's not super viable. We've got the 7-Eleven in Linwood hub as you kind of continue down where Linwood intersects with Railroad. That spot is not considered a priority hub because it's not considered a priority for the folks living in that area. It's considered dangerous and difficult to access, but we do have some code changes that will impact it. So that's why it's in orange there on the map. To kind of quickly kind of move up Linwood on this map, thinking about Wichita Town Center, it already allows quite a few of the various hub activities, and it's a kind of a tricky hub area because it's right on the border with Clackamas County's jurisdiction, and some of the area that the city had previously identified is not actually in the city. So it could be a focus of some code changes maybe in the future, but right now we don't have anything proposed there. Moving up on Stanley, Ball Michelle Park, that is it's really the only hub in Llewellyn. It's not commercial really. There is one commercial business across the street from the park, but it's technically non-conforming. So there's not a lot of opportunity for commercial stuff necessarily there, but recognizing that is a very highly utilized park and is functioning as a neighborhood hub there. As well. And the Family Dogs Johnson Creek area has some similar challenges. Some of that land that we thought might be interesting, somewhat vacant land has been partially developed, it seems like, and it doesn't seem in the near future that there's interest from those property owners in kind of shifting the businesses there. Moving over to Roswell Market, that's 42nd Ave, kind of just south of Johnson Creek. That is, one of the many neighborhood convenience stores. It's called the CN zone. We have some proposals to change the CN zone as well as a part of this. And so I'll call out also Sunny Corner Market as well. And it's not on here as a hub identified because it's quite close to downtown, but the Little Blue store is also in that zoning as well. And the kind of final two hubs to mention, 32nd and Olson, that is where Milwaukie Cafe is, that kind of intersection. There's a vacant property there that may at some point see some development. It's considered a priority hub, and we do have a code change that will somewhat impact that site, but generally speaking, that code change is primarily focused on the 42nd and Harrison hub, where we're proposing kind of expanding that area. It's kind of our most active and dense hub. And we're proposing kind of extending that zoning a little bit further down Harrison, thinking about some of the uses that Chapel Theater wants to somewhat expand and do. So that's as fast as I can do it. That's the basics of every hub. And I'll stop there for Vera.
Okay, so based on sort of the overview of the project, where we kind of started back in 2016, 2017 to today, I'm going to go through the proposed amendments themselves, what I like to call the nerd code, and go through what we're proposing as part of the code amendment package itself. So we have the intent of these proposed amendments, again, is to expand opportunities for commercial and civic activities in those identified hub areas. We want to streamline land use review processes where we can and where applicable. We do want to provide opportunities for temporary pop-up uses to help test some concepts and maybe have some pilot programs within the neighborhoods. And we want to streamline the zoning map. So we're proposing to consolidate some of the zones as well and eliminating some of the zones that we already have. Okay. So this is sort of the Cliff Notes for those who remember what a Cliff Note is. The Cliff Notes to our to the amendment package. These are our key amendments. So we are proposing to rezone that properties that are in the CL zone or the limited commercial zone to a neighborhood mixed use zone. And I'm going to go through all of these, but we want to upzone those zones to neighborhood mixed use. And we would be eliminating the CL zone as it exists right now. We are proposing to create a new zone called small scale mixed use, the SMU zone. And we are proposing to rezone properties that are currently in our neighborhood commercial zone or that CN zone to that small scale mixed use zone. And then again, to eliminate that CN zone. We're proposing to rezone a portion of the Milwaukie floral site, and I have a map that'll get to that new SMU zone. And we're proposing to expand the 42nd Avenue NMU zone, the neighborhood mixed use zone, by rezoning the properties that are the Chapel Theater site at 4107 and 4117 Harrison Street from where they are right now, which is a high density residential zone, to that neighborhood mixed use zone. So these are kind of the highlights, and I'm going to go through the details now. So the first thing is to talk about the proposal for the Milwaukie Floral site. So Milwaukie Floral is considered a non-conforming use. It is a commercial use within a residential zone. So the map that you see on the left-hand side is the existing zoning. So that orange zone is our high density residential zone, and the yellow zone is our moderate density residential zone. The red rectangle outlines the collection of properties that are known as the Milwaukie Floral site, all of it, basically from Lake Road all the way down to the creek or to the river. And so it is currently functioning as a non-conforming use for the greenhouses, the floral store itself, and so on. It's allowed to exist because it pre-existed there, but any kind of changes, expansions, or what have you would need to go through a pretty significant land use review process. Again, Milwaukie Floral was identified as a really important key neighborhood hub. So our proposal is to rezone a portion of that property, and that's the map on the right-hand side. You see sort of the new red box that we are proposing to rezone that portion of the Milwaukie Floral site to this new zone called small scale mixed use. The remainder of the property that is the Milwaukie Floral site would remain as a moderate density residential zone.
Vera,
Yes.
real fast, as someone who is slightly red-green colorblind.
Sure.
The outline on the right-hand side is exceptionally hard to differentiate.
Gotcha.
Can you just,
Yes.
yeah, maybe give me a little trace of that?
So it's basically the area from Lake Road, and it goes about midway down the site for Milwaukie Floral and cuts across. So it's sort of a
at that
line.
driveway kind of.
Correct.
Okay,
right.
great.
Yep.
Thanks.
So it's
Yeah.
basically the sort of the top half,
Yeah.
I guess.
And then the kind of the
property.
east property line right
Right.
there. Okay, great. Thank
Yep.
you.
So I'll just kind of go through some of these and then we'll get into the details of what these zones are. Another one of the sort of map amendments is to expand that 42nd Avenue neighborhood mixed use zone. So that NMU zone is basically sort of the Safeway area is what I would call it. And then again, the proposal is to expand that boundary to the west to pull in the Chapel Theater properties into that. The Chapel Theater functions as a community service use within that high density residential zone. So any modifications or changes or expansions to the Chapel Theater and their activities there would require pretty significant land use review. And so and this of course received a lot of support to kind of, let's pull that in to the NMU zone. And while we're doing that, let's add into the NMU zone language as permitted uses, live theater, playhouses, that kind of thing, so that we make sure that we can continue to encourage the activity within the neighborhood hub itself.
And just super quickly,
Yeah.
for legend purposes, the purple is the
The NMU,
existing
correct.
NMU.
Yes.
So the property's immediately adjacent to.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So yep, just pulling into two
Thanks.
extra properties to it. Yep. We also talked about that limited commercial zone that we are proposing to upzone to the neighborhood mixed-use zone. So what you see here outlined in red is the trolley trail hub that we're calling it. So the red boundary that you see here, I'm sort of outlining it with my cursor, is the existing CL zone that is that trolley trail hub. It's at Southeast 22nd Avenue and Bluebird. So the proposal is to take that zone and upzone it to neighborhood mixed use. Provides some more uses that would be allowed by right, gives us a little more height to the buildings, but hoping to encourage or to support a bit more activity within that trolley trail hub area. Still sticking to that CL zone, to the NMU zone. This is the area that is that 7-Eleven and Linwood hub. So again, that orange boundary is the existing CL zone, and again, proposing to upzone that to NMU. And that actually continues east towards the community college. The community college is also zoned CL. When we pulled the community college and annexed that in, we kind of did a cherry stem annexation, and it sort of follows along Harmony and pulls in the campus. So the campus and community college is a community service use. That doesn't change. It still would be a community service use within the NMU zone. But while we're already rezoning CL, we're upzoning all of the CL properties to that neighborhood mixed use zone. We don't anticipate a lot of change happening in this particular location, but we wanted to make sure that the zoning was consistent if we're already upzoning. And again, that CL zone would go away. And then this is a portion of existing CL that's actually at the northern section of 32nd Avenue and Van Water. There are 3 properties there that are currently zoned CL. And so we are, again, consistently rezoning those CL properties, upzoning those to that NMU. They are developed, they already have homes on those properties, but they have been historically zoned CL. So we're proposing to include those within that upzoning proposal to the NMU. So let's talk about what this means in words. So the CL zone right now allows some properties, and again, this is that limited commercial zone. This is the zone that affects the trolley trail hub, the 7-Eleven hub, and then those northern properties, they're on 32nd Avenue. So some things are permitted, like office and retail, personal and business services. Those are things like salons and dog groomers and that kind of thing. Restaurants, but restaurants are limited to a maximum size. Banks or repair-oriented businesses like small, like sewing machine repair or bike repair or something like that, those are conditional uses. That's a type 3 review before the Planning Commission to allow anything like that. Multi-unit housing is permitted, but it's again via conditional use. So these are kind of some of the broader categories of uses. What the NMU zone does by upzoning those properties allows these things to be permitted by right. So it does expand the permitted by right uses. So we're sort of trying to streamline or minimize that additional land use review for some of these uses that would make sense in those zones.
Maybe just quick
Yes.
clarifying question.
Sure.
So, which I think I understand, but
Please.
for the sake of the audience, in terms of someone wanting to offer a repair-oriented business in something that's currently zoned CL, a bike shop, for example.
Right.
That would require a type 3 variance in front of the Planning Commission.
Correct.
What's the cost on that? What's the extra time and paperwork on that?
Well, time equals paperwork, right? So, or I guess paperwork equals time.
Equals money.
Yes, the application fee for a conditional use or a type 3 application is $2,000. Takes about 75 days to process. For something that could potentially have the same kinds of impacts or none to something like a restaurant or retail. It's just sort of the way the code is written. So what we tried to do is kind of take another look at this language. Does this still make sense anymore? And we didn't think it did.
Yeah.
And so we're proposing to make some more things just to be permitted by right. And a bike repair shop, for example, is a very hub-ish kind of business, and that makes sense. And we don't think that a type 3 is appropriate.
So the
for
bike
that kind
repair
of thing.
shop wouldn't need the $2,000 application
Nope.
fee, 75 days. It would just kind of follow
Permitted by right.
standard
Exactly.
business procedure for the city. Great.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of give an
No,
example of
I'm
what
glad- thank you.
streamlining means in a practical
Yeah,
way.
I appreciate that.
Could I also ask a clarifying question, Chair?
Yes, please.
So with respect again to the conditional use requirement, in this case where we're showing multi-unit housing as conditional use, is that for a single use multi-unit housing, and mixed use development could include multi-unit housing as long as there was a commercial component?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay. And then as part of, it's not just the uses that we look at when we're looking at zones, we're also looking at the development standards. So setbacks, building height, sort of the physical aspects of the development. So you can see that by comparison, the building height is the same. That doesn't change from the CL zone to the NMU zone. There isn't a maximum lot coverage in the CL zone. It's 85% in the neighborhood mixed use zone. So we are asking for a little bit of landscaping in the NMU zone. But for the most part, the development standards are comparable. And so there isn't a dramatic amount of change going from the CL zone to the NMU zone. Okay. So now we're going to talk about that neighborhood commercial zone to that small scale mixed use zone. So these are the properties that are being proposed to be rezoned from that CN to the SMU zone. So these are what I would consider are sort of the convenience store zones. So in the picture on the left, that's the Roswell Market site on Roswell and 42nd Ave. The center picture is the Sunny Corner Market, that's on Monroe Street. And then to the right are the two properties that are currently in that neighborhood commercial zone on Washington Street. So that little blue store, and then the house that's directly west of it, both of those properties are currently zoned neighborhood commercial. So neighborhood commercial is a very limited zone when it comes to business uses or anything. Nothing is permitted by right. So every use that is allowed in the CN zone is required to is required to go through that conditional use review process. Again, that's that type 3 application process before the Planning Commission, $2,000 fee, 75-day notice, and coming in here before a public hearing. So while commercial uses are allowed, there are a lot of strings attached because of that review process. So you can see that food store, convenience store, laundry, also sort of outdated list of permitted uses. We haven't touched that CN zone, I don't know ever, if ever, frankly. So you can see on the chart that a lot of things are either a conditional use or they're not even listed, which means they'd likely not be permitted at all. So by creating this small scale mixed use zone, we are allowing things that are already there. So we have those convenience stores that are currently zoned CN, which means they are de facto conditional use. If any of those businesses wanted to change at all, they wanted to expand or change what they're doing there, like possibly providing food, maybe having some seating or whatever, that could be considered either a minor or a major change or a modification to their conditional use, and they would need to come back here before the Planning Commission as well. It's a lot of process for something that's been there for decades and decades. So again, that small scale mixed use zone is intended to reflect the things that we heard that folks would like to see within their neighborhoods as amenities, like food store, convenience store, some personal services like a salon, for example, even a restaurant, or that bike repair shop that we keep talking about. So we're trying to kind of broaden, again, the things that are permitted in these zones, again, trying to come back to implementing what the comprehensive plan is telling us and what all of the folks that we talk to are telling us about what they'd like to see in their neighborhoods. One of the things that did come up quite a bit is what we call in code, a drinking establishment. So basically a bar or a tavern that doesn't serve food. They are not listed certainly in the CN zone, but the way it was talked about as part of our engagement, we are proposing that it be permitted in that small scale mixed use zone in the neighborhoods, but that it is a conditional use. That's something that folks were kind of, no, we think there ought to be a little more review about something that just serves alcohol, basically, and not a restaurant kind of thing.
And so just for clarification purposes, with that being in the SMU zone, a conditional use, there would be a public process
Correct.
to inform whether or not anything like that, any of those specific parcels we just looked at would ever be able to kind of convert over to a drinking establishment.
Not without coming
Not
before the
without,
Planning
yeah.
Commission and having a full public process so
Okay.
folks could participate in that, correct? Yep.
And I apologize because I've started like asking the questions as we're going. I know we typically
Fine.
wait till the end. You know, I guess maybe just I'd be curious, like the CN zone as currently structured and SMU as proposed, would you say it's fair to characterize the CN as it currently exists, like constrains development activity or business activity
Absolutely.
and locks in what you have? And in some ways, the code that is being proposed is opening up more possibility
Yes.
for what those sites are today and might be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now?
That's exactly right. It absolutely, they're all kind of locked into what they are right now. We're disincenting any change or any opportunities on those sites. And what we are trying to do, again, is kind of coming back to what the intent of these code amendments are, is to provide more opportunities and expand opportunities in these hubs so that they can continue and maybe provide more amenities in the neighborhoods. Again, which is what we heard from folks
Yeah.
as part of this whole process.
Great,
So,
thanks for
yeah. Mhm.
clarifying on that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Could I jump in with another clarifying question here?
I've opened Pandora's box, so please join me,
I know.
Commissioner Edge.
I know. We're trying to avoid workshopping this, but the clarifications are helpful. So I just in my head, I'm trying to think on this list where bakeries and brew pubs would fit in, where the actual like production, is like occurring on site, and there just might happen to be like a small retail component, or it's like can you actually do like the actual brewing on site in this SMU zone? Is that considered a drinking establishment, or I'm just trying to, and trying to balance. I know we're trying to create gathering places, but we're also trying to create, jobs and, kind of a, economic activity. And so, would a brew pub fit in with this, or would a bakery fit in with this, where, it's kind of like the actual production activities occurring on site?
I'm so glad you asked. Yes. So this list I should have prefaced all of this with, this is not sort of a comprehensive list of all of the uses. So thank you, Commissioner Edge, for asking. So manufacturing and production is already in our mixed use zone sort of tables. So the SMU zone is kind of getting added to that. The way we define manufacturing production as it relates to a mixed use zone are things like, a brewery or a bakery or a woodworker or someone who's sort of producing or making something on site. However, the caveat within our mixed use zone is that we require, just like we do in the downtown, that there be a retail component. So you can do the manufacturing on site, but you have to have kind of a storefront that actually sells what you're making on site as well. So that's part of that process. So yes, exactly what you're asking about, bakery or a brewery or a cabinet maker or someone that's actually making things, that is permitted by right within this new SMU zone. And I should have kind of backed into this a little bit, and just to confirm that this SMU zone, this is the zone that we are proposing for the Milwaukie floral site as well. So they are not being rezoned from CN, they're being rezoned or being proposed to be rezoned from moderate density residential to this small scale mixed use zone. So thank you, Commissioner Edge, I appreciate the question. I was running out of chart space, so I'm trying to get in here, but yes.
Why don't we continue? Thank you.
And as far as the development standards go, so again, kind of the physical aspects of the development on the site, the minimum lot size is being reduced down to 1,500 square feet, which is consistent with our other mixed use zones. So we are kind of trying to create some consistency within those mixed use zones that we have. The building height is the same. It's still 35 feet, so that hasn't changed. The maximum lot coverage is higher in the mixed use zone because we're imagining more development or more building or something like that happening, but we are asking for some minimum vegetation as well. These are small sites, so if you limit the lot coverage too much, then you don't get any building and you actually don't get any physical structure on the property. So those are the development standards kind of as a comparison between the CN zone and the SMU zone. So that kind of wraps up the sort of the overview of the code amendments themselves that we're proposing. The public hearing notification process, I just want to be clear on kind of how we kind of went through all of this. So we did post the required 30-day notice with the code commentary back in early February. We emailed all the NDAs. We did send via snail mail, Measure 56 notice to all affected property owners. So Measure 56 is a notice that we're required to send to a property if your zoning is changing that might affect the land use on your property. So everybody got a letter from us in a goldenrod envelope. And then we also sent notice to all properties within 300 feet of those properties. So we wanted to make sure that everybody that might be affected by these proposed amendments did receive notice of it. And then of course, and we also did have an article in the March pilot to tell folks about the code amendments and to let folks know that the public hearings were starting. We did receive a couple of comments. We did receive some questions as well. Some folks came into the office as well as called us just about wanting some more information about the actual amendments. But the comments that we received, we did receive comments from Kathy Shields-Roeder, who lives across the street from the Sunny Corner Market. And they expressed concern about any increased commercial use at that site and any impacts that might have to the Monroe Street Greenway that is proposed along Monroe Street. And we did respond that because the Monroe Street Greenway is actually still in the early stages of design, we can accommodate, any potential change in use within that design process. But of course, we are unaware of any proposed changes to the Sunny Corner Market, but the Greenway design will not be impacted by that. If anything, any redevelopment of that site would need to accommodate the Monroe Street Greenway as part of their design process. And then we did receive a comment from Avery Fitzgerald in the Ardenwald neighborhood who does support the code amendments. The Planning Commission has some decision-making options this evening. Again, this is a request for a recommendation to City Council, who will ultimately make the decision on adoption of the code amendments. We are recommending, and we are asking that the Planning Commission recommend that Council approve the amendments per the findings in support of the approval that were in the packet. You could certainly recommend that Council approve the amendments with some revisions or modifications. We'll need to review those and read those into the record tonight. You could recommend that Council deny the proposed amendments. We'll need to read those findings into the record as well, or you could continue the public hearing. And that concludes the presentation. I'll stop sharing and we can continue with the hearing. Thanks very much.
That sounds great. Thanks. Might be good to have the presentation queued up though, if any specific questions come up. I know I started opening Pandora's box earlier, but let's officially open it and see if any members of the Planning Commission have any clarifying questions for staff. Go, Commissioner Carpenter.
Just one clarifying question on our schedule. Is there a deadline that we are held to in terms of when this needs to be recommended to City Council?
We are not. This is a type 5 land use review, which does not have a 120-day clock like quasi-judicial applications do. So no, there isn't a deadline. We have tentatively scheduled the public hearing with the City Council, but that of course that can get moved if we don't come out of this hearing with a recommendation.
And nothing from the state either that we need to be in compliance with? Great, thanks.
We're fine.
Yeah, just for my understanding of the process. So we are approving the code, or we're voting to approve the code changes and then also the rezoning of those specific sites. That's all one. And could we piecemeal that out if we hear testimony for some reason that we might want to carve out individual pieces of that?
Yes, so what the commission is doing will be sending a recommendation to City Council. Right, so your recommendation could, for example, approve the text amendments, but recommend that the boundary of one of the map changes be XYZ or something like that. So yes, you can change kind of what that recommendation looks like once it gets to City Council. Yes.
Great. Yep. Thank you.
Do any commissioners online have any clarifying questions for staff? Seeing none. I have one odd one, but I can ask you later because I think it's completely unrelated to any decision-making tonight. So just like the Sim City planner in me, I'm like, why this parcel that way? But we can take that up another time. Have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those included in the packet?
No, the comments that you received in the packet are what we have received.
Great. So we could transition then over to any audience testimony. Do we have anyone in the audience in the room who wishes to testify on the proposed application, or anyone online who wishes to testify? If anyone's online, you can raise your hand using the Zoom feature or press *9 if you're calling in. And if anyone would like to testify in support of the application, we'll start there. If you could please state your name and city of residence for the record.
There are no hands raised.
There's no hands raised in the room either. Does anyone wish to testify in kind of neutral to the proposed application? Hearing none, seeing none. Does anyone wish to testify in opposition to the proposed application? Hearing none, nothing online. Great. Maybe any other questions from planning commissioners regarding the application? Great. Gone. I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. The public testimony portion of the hearing on the Type 5 application for code amendments, file number ZA-2024-001 is now closed. Is the Planning Commission ready for discussion?
Yes.
Commissioner Edge, will you lead us off?
Thank you, Chair. Gladly. This has been a long time coming. The community's been working and been working towards this, and really excited about bringing neighborhood hubs to fruition for longer than I've been on the commission, and which now has been quite a while. So I'm excited to see this code package in front of us, and I'll acknowledge that not everything is perfect for everybody, but I think that this represents a good step forward, based on a lot of work, a lot of outreach, and a lot of work by the city. And then just to address the boilerplate, the findings and everything is consistent with with our comprehensive plan policies and legal requirements for code amendments. So I'm prepared to recommend to the City Council that they approve the package that's put before us tonight. And I know we didn't hear testimony from the public tonight on this, but again, there's been a lot of outreach and a lot of public input and collaboration that has gone into this, and so I feel comfortable recommending this for approval based on that. So those are my thoughts, and I'm certainly interested in hearing what the other commissioners feel about what we're looking at tonight.
Thanks, Commissioner Edge. Commissioner Foodmoyer, Mayor, sorry, apologies. I will get there.
You'll get there. It will be fine. I am kind of in the same as Commissioner Edge. I have been hearing and been going to all this engagement since I moved here, and it's been 8 years. So I've been following this process for the hubs for a long time, and I'm really excited. I went to this. I went actually to the meeting. One of the last engagements that you guys did, not engagement, but like a community meeting that you guys did. I am excited to see these changes, to see how the city progresses and evolved. I really I expressed this when I talked to Vera in that engagement, and I said, I read it in the report, I do want to see more minority voices into this in process and how this will probably support any of the minorities. Maybe this new code changes will support these small businesses that will actually will have to now go through all the hoops that you were mentioning before about how expensive and how difficult it is to obtain any permit to get any businesses actually running. So I am excited to see how this will affect this small community members that will need our support in the Planning Commission. So I read almost all of it, so I'm really excited and I'm really ready to support this to have the council approve it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Commissioner Mulhorn, Commissioner Carpenter?
Yeah, I'll just say I also am ready to support recommending approval and just appreciate the work staff has done on this. I think it's a great example of community engagement in this process, and it's been great to see.
Thank you.
Fully support at this point, yeah.
Great. I think I'll echo many of the things that were said. Like Commissioner Edge, I agree that this meets comprehensive plan, a number of other things. Really want to thank staff for the outreach work that you all have done. I think you've done a very robust and thorough job, as others have said, kind of set the bar high. I know we can also aim a little higher in terms of really trying to kind of reach into some segments of our community that typically don't participate in some of these planning processes. I know you all have tried and have that very strong commitment. I'm also super excited about the Neighborhood Hubs project broadly. I think as I shared at our final work session, I wish this was going further. And I know that there's been conversation about stepping into a phase 3 version of the project. And I think I'll just reaffirm my support for doing so sooner than later, and for really thinking about the economic development moves that we can make, not just things like those that were outlined in the kind of proposed toolkit, but also thinking about height bonuses, other moves that we can make as a community to make some of these developments pencil. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not the city doing the development. It's people like some of the faces I see in this room that are investing their personal resources into kind of transforming our community. I think we've heard very clearly from our community that people want this. And so let's not waste any time moving into that phase 3. So I think with that, really happy to support this. Maybe with that recommendation to City Council that we get started on phase 3. And if there's no other further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we recommend City Council approve the proposed amendments in ZA 2024-001 as proposed.
Great, it's been moved.
I will second.
And it's been seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. This decision is a recommendation to the Milwaukie City Council, which will make the final decision after a public hearing. Please see planning staff for details concerning the council hearing date and process. Deep breath. Let's move on to our next item of business, which is the Climate-Friendly Equitable Communities Code Amendments. I'd also like to thank any community members leaving for joining us tonight. Appreciate you taking time. So thank you very much for that. The next item, agenda item is a Type 5 application for code amendments related to the new off-street parking requirements in the state of Oregon's transportation planning rule, which was amended through the Climate-Friendly Equitable Communities rulemaking process, also known as CFEC. The Type 5 application for code amendments is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is for the Commission's consideration of application number ZA-2022-005. If you're here to testify, Please remember to confine your remarks to the application and the relevant criteria, and try and avoid repetition or information that may be less relevant. For anyone online, the moderator might just mute you if disruptions occur, or we might ask you to step outside of the room if you were here in person. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to Milwaukee City Council regarding whether the proposal confirms with all the city's applicable criteria. I'd like to ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance section or sections where the criteria can be found.
Thanks. Yeah, the sections, MMC section 19902, amendments to maps and ordinances, and also chapter 19-1000, review procedures.
Fantastic. Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to abstain from this hearing? No? Does any member of the Planning Commission wish to declare an actual or a potential conflict of interest? Heads shaking and noes? No. Great. Let's proceed to the staff report.
One moment while we get that pulled up.
Cue the Jeopardy music.
Okay. Thank you all. As stated, this is for land use file ZA-2022-005. It's related to the climate-friendly equitable communities rulemaking, and specifically sections of those rules that deal with parking in the city. We have gone over this a few times, so apologies for redundancy, but I'm going to kind of walk through some of the origins of this just because it's a public hearing to make sure that everybody is read into to this process. So this all started in 2020, Governor Brown issued Executive Order 20-04. The executive order had the overarching goal of reducing transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions in the state. The rules basically directed state commissions and state agencies to take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They did a number of things. They changed how jurisdictions update transportation system plans and how they coordinate transportation and land use planning. They also changed how jurisdictions regulate off-street vehicle parking. So we started this as the land use file number indicates in 2022. And then this body recommended at the time that City Council adopts a package of code amendments that is very similar to what's before you tonight. We paused that adoption after the recommendation when we learned that the state was going to be doing a corrections and clarifications rulemaking process. Unlike the Neighborhood Hubs project, this is related to state requirements, and so there was a requirement in the rules that we adopt some of these amendments by June 30th of 2023. The city requested an extension from the state and was granted that extension. And so now we have to take action the code needs to be in place by June 30th of 2024, specifically for these off-street parking rules. So here's the long list of prior actions. I'm running out of room on this slide. I had to reduce the font size. We still have patience. We're still there. So as mentioned, we started this in 2022, and we have conducted a number of briefings, work sessions. There was the recommendation for approval, and then we sort of restarted that process to some extent this year, just to refresh everybody's memory about what this was, what this entailed, and to walk through some of the changes that we made to the code since it was recommended by Planning Commission last year. So an overview of the proposed amendments, big picture, what this code package would do. So it would remove off-street vehicle parking minimum requirements citywide. If people provide parking or choose to provide parking, which they're allowed to do, they still need to meet code requirements for what that parking looks like and how it functions. We then removed, this code package would remove references to required parking throughout the code. There are some new standards that the administrative rules require for large parking lots. So we discussed this at the last work session. The state has defined a large parking lot as vehicle parking spaces and maneuvering areas and in excess or equal to or in excess of a half acre. We talked about changing that or reducing that to a quarter acre at the work session last month. And then, as noted previously, we took an opportunity while the state was going through the corrections and clarification process to look at the city's bicycle parking requirements. While we were on the topic of parking, we thought we would tackle those as well. So there are some new bicycle parking requirements in the state administrative rules. We don't technically have to comply with those until we update our transportation system plan, which we, as mentioned, we are currently in the process of doing. But while we were in there, we took a look at the new administrative rules and wanted to make sure that the code we were recommending was compliant with those rules. And I'll have another note on that in just a few slides. So that's a big overhaul of section 19609, which is the bicycle parking chapter. So those are all CFEC driven changes for the most part. Again, bicycle parking was somewhat CFEC related and somewhat addressed sort of long-standing challenges that staff have had with that code. And then there are also some non-CFEC related changes that we've discussed in previous work sessions. Off-street parking standards for residential properties. Single detached units and also plex developments, cottage clusters. This would primarily be in our moderate density residential zone. We had at the work session talked about two different changes. One that would allow a fourth parking space to be located in a required front yard for quadplexes. So every unit would be permitted to have one parking space located in a required front yard. And that was just to address some challenges that staff were seeing with applications coming in. And then the other was related to boat and RV parking. We had suggested that we require any boat and RV parking located in a required yard to be comprised of a durable and dust-free surface. We heard from Planning Commission that that was not a code amendment they supported, and so we removed that from the code package here. And then lastly, there's just some minor non-substantive language changes for Title 19 consistency. So just to make sure we're using consistent language throughout the code. So corrections and clarifications. So this is changes made to CFEC requirements through the second rulemaking. Just reviewing what changed from this year versus last February when Planning Commission made the original recommendation. So these are changes to the state rules, not necessarily what we are recommending here. So the state had originally proposed a threshold for large parking lots at a quarter acre and then up that to a half acre. There were some more prescriptive elements for what pedestrian connections needed to look like for commercial properties and institutional properties. And the state heard from jurisdictions that those might not fit in all situations, so they removed those. They changed some rules around one of the standards for those large parking lots are related to tree canopy coverage for off-street parking to try to mitigate the heat island effect, or basically that, large parking lots, large collections of asphalt, tend to be hotter on some of the hottest days that we experience in the region. And so they previously did not require that all off-street parking areas, large off-street parking areas require tree canopy. Instead, it was sort of one of these, what they refer to as climate mitigation actions. So it was one of among many choices that applicants could choose from to sort of try to, promote climate friendliness. Now, there's sort of this baseline requirement that all large parking lots have to provide at least a minimum of a 30% tree canopy. And again, that's the state requirement, not necessarily what we're proposing here. And then lastly, those climate mitigation actions, which I just mentioned for large parking lots, the state reduced that standard, which was previously 50% to 40%. So bicycle parking, which I just discussed, in terms of the actual changes that we are proposing for that section. So these are new standards that were not in the original package that Planning Commission recommended last year. So they do a few things. They establish a new minimum parking quantity requirements. There's a new methodology that's been introduced, or a modification process, I should say, to recognize that there might be situations where the minimum quantities that we've adopted in the code, or are recommending to adopt in the code, might not work for all situations. And so we've put a process into the code where applicants can basically go through and reduce the number of bicycle parking spaces that they need to provide if they can demonstrate that it's truly not necessary, or there's something else that they're doing maybe to promote active transportation. There's approval criteria that we've recommended there. There's a new requirement to provide at least a minimum of 2 short-term and 2 long-term parking spaces, and we've really sort of fleshed out in the code the development standards for short-term and long-term parking, to more clearly define short-term and long-term bicycle parking, which is sort of widely recognized throughout the region as sort of 2 sort of distinct types of bicycle parking. Short-term being, for visitors to location, and long-term really being for people who are there for longer periods of time. So changes since the February 27th, 2024 work session. So the font has gotten a little bit smaller here. These changes are mostly based on the feedback that we heard from Planning Commission at that work session, and then also in conversation with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. Sort of provided some comments to us, some informal comments to us last minute about the code amendments. So the threshold for large parking lot applicability has been reduced in the code that's before you tonight from half acre to a quarter acre, in line with what Planning Commission seemed to be the direction you all seem to want to go on that. The minimum canopy coverage required for large parking lots for a quarter acre was increased from 30%, which again is that state minimum requirement, back to 40% to match our sort of citywide tree canopy coverage goal. The climate mitigation action tree canopy requirement, so that again, that 40% would be the base standard, and then applicants have to choose from one of 2 climate mitigation actions in addition to meeting that tree canopy coverage standard. So that can either be on-site solar, the provision of on-site solar, or it could be a increased canopy coverage from 40% to 50%. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to everybody, that sort of bumping up that baseline also sort of entailed bumping up that climate mitigation from 40 to 50. And then again, I mentioned the requirement for boat and RV parking to be essentially a durable and dust-free surface, and those required yard areas was removed. And then we talked about this some at the work session, the applicability for large parking lot development standards. So this is basically about when you have an existing off-street parking area that is a quarter acre or larger. How are those, but does not conform with these new development standards? How are those properties, how do they become conforming with the standards? And what we've basically said, we've established a sort of a 50% threshold for removing, if you're removing 50% or more, excavating is what we're, is sort of, if you're excavating 50% or more concrete or asphalt of your existing parking area, then the entire parking lot would have to come into conformance with these new large parking lot development standards. So that's not the only way that parking lots will become more conforming with these standards. The way the code is currently set up, and this is a bit in the weeds, so apologies in advance, but is for developments that are, if you are developing a property and you are expanding the footprint or the floor area of the building by more than 100%, what our code says is you have to meet all of the off-street parking standards in the code. If you are developing below that, so increasing by less than 100% of your floor area or building footprint, there is a requirement that you have to improve your parking lot in line with what the code wants, but we put a limitation on it for reasonableness considerations. We're trying to be fair that you're making minor improvements. We would like to see some minor improvements to the parking area as well, but we recognize that your project, doesn't warrant full compliance with the code. And so there's it's 10% of the permit value and then we have a list of sort of improvement areas that we would like to see. And so we've added through this code package sort of some of these large parking lot requirements as well that we'd like to see you start to come into compliance, but we're going to try to be fair and reasonable about it.
If I may, real quick clarification question. You used, in regards to 50% of the existing area removed, I do read it as disturbed. So is it removed and replaced or just any sort of?
Removed and replaced for parking improvements. So to get to the concern, I think that Commissioner Edge maybe brought up last time about folks who are looking to redevelop their property and maybe not develop more parking or replace that parking. The standard would kick in if you were excavating that asphalt and then replacing it for parking. Does that answer your question?
It does. I just wanted to make sure that the wording was still accurate or correct. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, more changes since the February 27th work session. So these were changes that were made because of conversations that we had with the state about our code. One, again, this is kind of in the weeds, but we proposed an amendment to subsection 195047. And that amendment, that subsection, I should say, is about pedestrian connectivity and circulation. We apply those standards to a wide variety of development situations. It was not clear necessarily that those, from the way that the code was written, that those pedestrian circulation standards applied if Chapter 19700, which is our sort of public improvements chapter in the code, if that was not triggered. So we just needed to tweak the language to make sure that those pedestrian connectivity and circulation standards applied whenever a new quarter-acre parking lot was developed, and not just when Chapter 19700 was applicable. So that was a helpful comment from the states. We adjusted the priority list in subsection 196025. So this is the applicability section for all of the off-street parking standards that the city has. This is kind of the section that you look at to try to understand what you need to be looking at in the rest of the off-street parking chapter. And the priority list is what we're looking to improve when that 10% threshold applies. So this is the city's list of priorities. So we've removed from that list currently, there's a priority for minimum number of off-street parking spaces. So that's been removed, and some of these new requirements have been added to that list. And then finally, subsection 19606(3)(f) and 609(4)(a)(5) were amended to ensure that all required bicycle parking includes adequate lighting. So those, the 609 is the bicycle parking chapter, and then 606 is again, it's one of those sections that applies to all parking lots, and it's a lighting standard. It basically just says that you need to provide lighting. And so we omitted both of those sections just so that they were talking to each other, so that people knew whether they were in 606 or 609, that if they're providing bicycle parking, that they need to provide adequate lighting. And that is a state requirement as well. This is new. You have not seen this. This was, this is, would need to be read into the record, into your recommendation tonight. This was another catch by the state that the minimum parking requirements, bicycle parking requirements, currently include a standard. This is just the exact same standard that we currently have in the code for transit centers, that they need to, when a transit center is built, it needs to provide a certain number of off-street parking spaces. The new administrative rules are a little bit more expansive on the types of transit facilities that they would like to see have bicycle parking. And so in order to comply with the new administrative rules, we needed to expand the list of the number, the types of transit facilities that we require bicycle parking for. And so what staff is recommending here is that we replace the highlighted text, which is what's in your code package right now, with these three different categories of park and ride facilities, transit centers, and light rail stations. And the delay in part is there just aren't a lot of examples of what these numbers should look like. And so staff took a little bit of time to do some research. And this could be something that we revisit maybe through the transportation system plan. We've reached out to TriMet to sort of try to better understand how they think about facilities planning for these types of uses. But this is where we're at for now. And this is one of those things that we would need to include in our code to comply with the new administrative rules.
And just to confirm, I'm following you. This is CFAC driven.
This is
we need
this is CFAC driven.
This by June 2024.
So
for June 2024.
And we
could then modify it. We could then modify it later, or
we could modify it later. We were hoping to adopt code that complied with the it's OAR 660-12-630. It's the bicycle parking section of the CFAC rules. We were hoping to adopt code compliant. This particular rule, that 630, we don't have to comply with technically until we update our transportation system plan. So we do have some time on this particular. So if you all did not want to move forward with this recommendation tonight, we could revisit it. And yeah, I am fairly confident that we probably will not receive any new light rail stations between now and the adoption of the transportation system plan.
I'm not a betting person, but I'll bet on that as well.
And then just one more note on bicycle parking. I learned this today. The governor's new Senate bill, 1537, the governor's housing bill, which is Senate Bill 1537, which has been in the news recently. There's a provision that local jurisdictions to promote housing production are basically required to approve certain adjustments to code provisions. And so I just think it's worth putting it out there as you consider these amendments that there is some language in that bill, which I don't think the governor has signed yet, but likely will, that two of these standards, so one of those automatic adjustments is what they're referred to as around the number of spaces. So developers could reduce it to 1/2 bicycle parking space per unit. And there are some approval criteria in the Senate bill. And then the second is about the location, that there's the ability to adjust some of the locational requirements. So just as you discussed this, I wanted to you to have all the information.
Great, thanks.
And then, of course, as with the Neighborhood Hubs project, you have 4 options. You can recommend that council approve the proposed amendments per the recommended findings in support of approval. And staff's recommendation would actually be that you recommend that council approve the proposed amendments with revisions, specifically adding in the new standards for bicycle parking for transit, various types of transit centers. But then you can also recommend the city council deny the proposed amendments, or you could choose to continue the hearing.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Also appreciate your patience and diligence, as this has been a little bit of a moving target. So you've done a great job on that. And yeah, let's open it up for questions. Commissioner Edge?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ryan, for the presentation and for all the work that you put into this. Quick question on like the park and ride standards, for bicycle parking. Did you happen to look at the Park Avenue park and ride and see what the quantities of bicycle parking are there for long-term and short-term, to just use as a reference?
I didn't know, but I did hear just in having some conversations that that maybe there were some recent changes to that particular park and ride lot around bicycle parking. So yeah, I didn't look, but yeah, it's a good suggestion.
And maybe just building on Commissioner Edge's question, aside from Park Avenue, there's also kind of Tacoma Johnson Creek. I don't know if you looked at any of that.
I looked at how we came to the amount of parking that was provided at those spaces. I didn't necessarily, we don't have data on utilization or anything like that, but so those were approved through various land use approvals or procedures. But there was as I understand it, the larger application was it was a community service use. And so that allowed for some negotiation with TriMet. And that is how those numbers were reached. There was basically sort of a back and forth with TriMet about what would be most appropriate for that.
Yeah, I can, just anecdotal, but I can tell you as a regular transit rider there that the utilization is extremely low these days of those facilities.
You're blocked out of those facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the long-term parking, I think, is closed entirely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Any other kind of clarifying questions for staff?
do we currently have definitions, or would we propose definitions for those 3 transit centers, the new ones proposed?
We don't have, there's nothing in 19201 that defines them. I mean, they are, I think, recognized tri-met developments. So yeah, this is always a bit of a tension in the code between, do we define everything, or is it a recognized land use that we'd be comfortable enough acknowledging that we know it when we see it, type of situation. So yeah.
I had a question on 19606.4. This is the 50% or more of an existing parking lot. I'd just be curious on the word choice between excavated, which is what is in the proposed code, versus something like disturbed or modified, and kind of any thoughts kind of on that?
Yeah, the excavation language was the state put together guidance documents to help jurisdictions implement this particular rule around large parking lots. And their recommendation was disturbed might include, could be read to mean restriping or changing the circulation pattern or doing an overlay, something that is some more maintenance based. And so the state's recommendation on this was this excavation standard. If you were tearing up concrete or asphalt, that's when it seemed reasonable. So we took their guidance on that one.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from the commission? Otherwise, we can move on to any testimony. Nope, seeing none. Great. Have we received any new correspondence other than what was included in the packet?
We have not.
Okay. Do we have anyone who wishes to testify on the application tonight? If so, could they please raise their hand on Zoom, *9 online, or if you're in the room, please fill out a comment card and you can hand it to Ryan. I like to wait for the awkward silence. Sometimes it motivates people. Great. Well, we don't have any testimony, so no responses to testimony. Does any other final clarifying questions from Planning Commission for staff? Great. I will close the public testimony portion of the hearing. The public testimony portion of the hearing on the Type 5 application for code amendments file ZA-2022-005 is now closed. Is the commission ready for discussion? Anyone interested in leading off? Commissioner Edge.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this has been a long time coming too. This application number has 2022 in the name, and that's not a typo. We've been talking about this one for a long time, and we did get an extension from the state to delay our adoption of these while they were in flux. So it's not like we've been screwing around. But anyway, it has been a long time coming, and I appreciate the changes that staff worked in since our last work session. It's clear that you put a lot of thought into, particularly how much of a parking lot needs to be excavated before qualifying for triggering the threshold for the standards, and so I appreciate that. I think that I'm happy with the compromise here, and seeing what you've come up with. So yeah, I'm prepared to recommend these amendments for approval by City Council tonight, as well as including the amendment requested by staff for park and rides, transit centers, and light rail stations. The one thing that I might, just for kicks, ask my other commissioners if we might recommend a change on the language is light rail station. I'd prefer not to be so mode specific. I'd rather just say high capacity transit station and not be stuck on whether it's rubber tires or steel wheels.
Great. Any other discussion from commissioners?
I'll just say that it feels like we just had the work session on this, so I appreciate the changes that have been made since then, and am, also prepared to recommend to City Council that we approve these. And I would support Commissioner Edge's recommendation to change the wording from light rail station to high capacity transit station. I think that makes a lot of sense, gives us a little bit of flexibility as well. So, thank you.
Seen some heads shaking, but not a lot of discussion. I think I would just kind of add, appreciate staff listening to some of my own concerns about code changes and seeing some proposed code removed from the package. So thank you for that. And then likewise, also support Commissioner Edge's proposed changes there. So if there's no further discussion, perhaps we can get a motion and we can take a file that's almost 2 years old and advance it in the process.
I think I can work some motion out here. It needs to be a little customized, I guess. So I move that we recommend approval of file ZA-2022-005 with the amendments as requested by staff, and for the transit facilities, transit centers, park and rides, and high capacity transit stations instead of light rail stations.
Great. It's been moved excellently. Is it seconded?
Second.
It's been seconded stupendously. Any further discussion on the motion? I think I'll just add, again, good job on all of this work. I know, Ryan, it's been tracking, like I said, a moving target. I appreciate kind of all the due diligence on this. So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. This decision is a recommendation of the Milwaukee City Council, which will make a final decision after a public hearing. See planning staff for details concerning the City Council hearing date and process. And it's not in my script, but I'm just going to gavel this one because it's done. Thank you. I feel like a round of applause. Great. Let's move on to Planning Department, other business updates. Are there any items from commissioners for discussion or from planning staff?
No updates from the department for tonight.
Maybe just friendly reminder, Transportation System Plan Workshop coming to you next week, this room, City Hall. Be there, be square. Future for forecast meetings.
Our next meeting is...
Forecast for future meetings, sorry,
right.
I said that totally backward.
I knew what you meant. Our next meeting is March 26th, more code. So buckle up. We're talking about Title 17, our Land Division Code Amendments public hearing. And then there's a work session item with Brett talking about the Natural Resource Code Amendments as well.
I had flagged it for Laura, but just friendly reminder, that is the week of spring break in Oregon, so we should just make sure that we have quorum. Anything else? Wonderful. Well, thanks for the great Planning Commission meeting. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion that we adjourn.
Been moved.
I will second.
It's been seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Have a good night. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.